My name is Jonathan Tilbury. I'm the Managing Director of National Student Esports NSE. My background, I discovered Counter-Strike in about 2004. I got very into CS very quickly and started attending Insomnia events from, I think it was probably I-27 that was my first event. But it kind of gave me this introduction to this amazing community that I really connected with. Obviously, back then, esports was much more niche. So my niche ended up being games that were kind of newly released and that had a bit of an esports marketing budget behind them. When I moved to Multiplay, my first job was to design a global tournament. I was given the brief that Multiplay wanted to do a major esports tournament that would attract the attention of people worldwide. We looked at the various options that were available and decided that Hearthstone was the best game to target for a first tournament. The logic for that being that Hearthstone was really trending at the time. It was often sort of the number one category on Twitch. And also with it being a 1v1 game, we thought it would be easier for us to perfect the broadcast. It would also be slightly cheaper, so we'd be able to kind of get more runway out of it. So we set up what we called the True Silver Championship. It was a 16-player invitational with a $30,000 prize pool. We invited players from North America, Korea, China. My role in the tournament was essentially designing the entire thing, proposing it internally, project managing it, and then ultimately delivering it. And that included working with the talent, working with the players to kind of negotiate their travel arrangements and things like that, as well as the boring stuff like hotel lists and coordinating with production to make sure that we had the right kit. Oh, and obviously managing the budget, which was probably the most challenging bit of the whole thing. Then I moved to game, and my remit there as strategy manager was to look at helping to create a kind of strategy for game as a whole. So not just looking at multiplayer as an element of game, but looking at the entire group and saying, what can we use that we've created through multiplay to create kind of new revenue streams for game, to help game better market its proposition, connect with more people, etc. So it was a really exciting job. My kind of duties included designing I had some input on the brand and the design of the brand, but really it was looking at what would connect with the players, what would actually bring people in and get them using the space. So designing things like the Arena Clash concept, and then helping to kind of sell that vision and explain that vision to other people. I ended up leaving game in 2017, and the reason was it was a combination of there was some really exciting stuff happening with the university sports governing body, and also I wasn't a big fan of working in a kind of a big corporate company. I've done it sort of before. I did it in engineering, and I was really looking for kind of an opportunity to do something where it was slightly less rigid and you could kind of move faster, I guess. So I was recruited by the sports governing body to kind of help put NSE together, and it probably took, I would say, 6 months to get the proposition right. And it was a lot of internal selling again. Like I had to do a lot of explaining. So the lessons that I learned from game in a big company really helped me suddenly in an environment with fewer people, because I had to help them understand why some ideas were good, why some ideas were bad, and create that space to actually do something that genuinely drove value for the community rather than just being activity for activity's sake. That's my experience. That's where I've come from. And what I think I really wanted to do was to share with you something that I think about on a daily basis. If I didn't do this, I wouldn't be where I am at the moment. I read a book about 7 or 8 years ago now that had a whole chapter on cognitive biases and how often the human brain is wrong. And it made me think about the way that I behaved in so many different situations. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. So you can see from the graph there, essentially the principle is the less you know about something, the more you think you know about something. You have to have a baseline of knowledge to understand what you don't know. And if you don't have that baseline of knowledge, then you constantly overestimate how easy something might be, how good you might be at something. The way in which I talk to agencies and especially technical people has totally changed in 5 years. And it's a really important skill, and I think probably one of the most important soft skills you can develop, how to talk to people that are experts on something. And if you're working in technology, even if you're a technology expert or an expert in a certain area yourself, you are always going to run into this challenge where you have to talk to somebody that knows significantly more about a technical subject than you do. But you need to work together to get to a resolution, and understanding how to communicate what you want and communicate your points, whilst also acknowledging your own limitations, it's really, really important. The second thing I wanted to talk about is professional defamation, or defamation professionnel. This is the tendency to look at things from the point of view of your own expertise, your own specialism, your own profession, rather than from a broader perspective, or I guess from somebody else's perspective as an expert. This is, again, such an easy trap to fall into. And I want to show you one way in which I fall into this all the time. If there's an objective that the team wants to achieve, let's say I want to drive an extra 5% awareness of what we do. My proposal as a customer experience specialist, which is, I think, the best way to describe what my previous experience looks like, would be, okay, if we spend lots of money on developing this great new feature that improves this, that, and something else, then people will promote us more to their friends and family. So we'll get a higher net promoter score, and that will drive the additional 5% awareness. But we need to develop this feature. And a colleague's response as a marketing specialist would probably be to say to me, yeah, but why don't we just spend 1/100th of that on a targeted social campaign that's guaranteed to have an actual measurable impact? Because we'll spend 100 times less and achieve the same thing. When you see it through the lens of your own experience, you always think you have the best idea to solve the problem, and a lot of the time you don't. It's so easy to tunnel vision on something and say, no, that's the solution to the problem, when actually somebody that works in a different discipline or has different experience might see something completely different as a solution that might be 1,000,000 times easier, 1,000,000 times cheaper. You have to be really careful that you don't just tunnel vision on what you know. You're constantly asking other people and staying open to their opinion. The next one is one that I think pretty much everyone's familiar with, which is confirmation bias. The tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or strengthens one's prior personal beliefs or hypotheses. And I've got a really good example of this, which is the slide from earlier on that True Silver Championship project. So you can see there I put the viewership stats on there. And I remember at the time coming out of the tournament and sitting in a meeting and saying, look, our objective was to get as many viewers as possible and get eyes on what we were doing and eyes on Insomnia. And we absolutely did that. And we did it by marketing this tournament really well. We did this partnership, and we made sure it was posted on this forum, and we spoke to the Reddit mods. And because of all of that, we marketed it really well and it was successful. And we don't need to refine any of that for the next tournament because we nailed it. I wasn't thinking about all of the other decisions and factors that influence whether or not something like that is successful. Like, we made other decisions that had an influence on the viewership. The game we picked had more of an influence on viewership than any of the marketing we could possibly have done for it. The players that we invited had more of an impact on viewership. The marketing itself, in the example of True Silver, was awful. I mean, this might be a bit hyperbole, my retrospective. No tournament in the history of esports has been marketed as poorly as the True Silver Championship. But if we'd recognized that there was an issue with the marketing, we would have done something that would have driven a larger increase with little work than anything else that we did over the whole series of tournaments. But it really does make a difference. It's so easy to do. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is correspondence bias, because I think of all of the behaviors and thinking patterns that influence the way in which teams and people work together, this is the most dangerous. Like, this really can undermine a team and the team's ability to work together. It's if you critically analyze somebody else's behavior, you make assumptions that it's something that's been a certain way in which they act or something that they do has been influenced purely by internal factors, like they're lazy or they're slow or they don't know what they're doing, rather than external factors that might actually be the genuine cause. If you have been slow to produce a piece of work because somebody else came and said, this is more important, I need you to get this done quickly before you get back onto that other piece of work, you know what happened. So you don't question your own ability, you don't question yourself, your personality, you know exactly what happened. However, it's so easy to look at somebody else, not recognize the external factors that have influenced them, and then make a judgment about them that influences the way that you talk to them, that influences the way that you behave around them, and ultimately creates tension. So constant awareness that there's a risk of doing that, and always trying to understand other people's sort of sides of a story or whatever, that's super important.